Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we'll be talking about a brand new mod which, if anything, was very nostalgic. You see, this is the Black Skull's HORDE. And yes, it is a Horde faction just like in Warhammer 2 if you remember those old school Hordes. So if you're looking for something a little bit different and you want to play around with nothing but Black Orcs essentially, and some normal Orcs but mostly focusing around Black Orcs, this one is going to be the one for you. Let's talk about a few things. So first, faction effects and lord effects. Faction effects attribute expendable for all greenskins except Black Orcs for all armies. Unlocks hero recruitment, Black Orc Big Boss for all armies. Diplomatic relations minus 50 with the Chaos Dwarves. Campaign movement range plus 10% for all armies. A war has a high chance to contain Black Orcs. Replenishes 25% campaign movement range after raising a settlement for all characters. Upkeep minus 20% for Black Orc units. You cannot confederate other greenskin factions, and you cannot recruit any goblin units, heroes, or lords. This is where things become a little bit interesting, because if you know about the history of the Black Orcs, they were created by the Chaos Dwarves, they rebelled, and you're going to be kind of playing as part of this rebellion in a sense. But before we jump into the campaign, we do have some Lord effects. So income from raising settlements plus 30% for Lord's Army, passive ability Frenzy for Black Orc units in Lord's Army, passive ability Guardian for Black Orc Big Bosses in Lord's Army, and finally replaces the War for Scar Fang's War. So your campaign is going to begin in the border between Solent and the Vaults. This means that you're going to have quite a few different enemies to fight with. You can completely ignore them though, because there's a lot of movement that you can get from this. The idea here is you're not going to be building up an empire, so keep that in mind. It's old school Horde style gameplay, and yeah, it's not too bad. It's definitely something fresh after you've been playing so much Warhammer 3 for the past like 2 or 3 years at this point. But obviously that's not all. We do have a lot to talk about. First, let's talk about your legendary lord. So this guy is obviously very focused on melee. If you've been used to using Grimgor before, then you're pretty much used to using him here. He's got a bunch of bonuses which are going to boost up Black Orc units, because the idea here is kind of just focusing heavily on as many Black Orcs as possible. And yeah, this is the Grimgor style play that a lot of people were expecting, because there's some extra units there. There's items, by the way, you'll automatically unlock them, but their stats will not show up prior, which is kind of weird. But other than that, yeah, pretty high stats. He's there to do a lot of damage. Looks pretty damn cool too. I'm not sure where the helmet's from, but like the weapon is very cool. The character is going to be like Grimgor. You're going to be playing like Grimgor. The only difference is there's a horde, and the idea there is that you're going to be pushing out to hurt as much as possible. You'll also have access to a legendary hero who's rather unique because he's essentially a Black Orc spellcaster, very well armored. He's got access to the Lore of the Big War, can have a Warboar or a Wyvern, and he does have his own items. This is the only Black Orc spellcaster that you'll get, so don't worry. It's pretty interesting, actually. It's a very interesting concept. Overall, pretty cool hero. He does have some pretty decent effects there, and yeah, you can have him in combat without a problem, which is nice, because most spellcasters end up being relatively squishy. Design-wise, he's pretty cool too, which I think is kind of important when you're trying to make up something like this. So this is an old-school Horde faction. That means that your actual campaign is going to focus around your characters, and yeah, it's not too bad. As you can see, you are kind of cut off in terms of roster. We'll be talking that a little bit later. There are some unique units there, and you do have some special buildings specifically for your legendary lord. I really do like this. I think it's kind of nice to get that nostalgic feeling back. It's obviously not as good as the Beastmen Hordes. This is more Warhammer 2 styling, but it definitely does bring in a breath of fresh air for the greenskins. I know a lot of people were keen on the greenskins and they wanted to play around with some more stuff, but obviously Gorbad hasn't been the biggest thing for a lot of people, which is kind of understandable. It's just one character that is going to be very one-dimensional in that case. But yeah, there is more stuff to this also. There is a reworked technology tree, which is going to just make it a little bit bigger, but also more compact. And it's just going to follow on the units that you have access to, because you don't have all the units that the greenskins normally do. It overall does look a little bit better. I do prefer the vanilla styling, but this works well for what you're playing with a very specific faction. Scrap upgrades are still there, so you're not really missing out on anything. Everything that the unit has access to, this character has access to, is going to be getting some upgrades. The campaign's going to focus around being a Black Orc, so pretty much just going to get your revenge on the Chaos Dwarves. You'll have access to a bunch of orcs from the beginning, so you'll be able to build up a force, which is good. I mean, They're not the best, it's orc boys, but yeah, it's not too bad. But yeah, you're going to have to focus around killing the actual, you know, Chaos Dwarf factions. You'll get your small campaign victory there. You're a little bit far off, but it doesn't really take that long to get there, which I think is quite important. And then if you want to go for long victory, it's kill off the Chaos Dwarfs, but also go for the other greenskin factions. That can only be one type of thing. Yeah, the gameplay loop is pretty relaxed because all you'll be doing is just making your way through the areas. It does take a while to actually get to the Darklands if you're taking some time, but it does allow you to go up to deal with Sylvania and start farming some traits if you so wish, because obviously there is a pretty good trait there when it comes to the wound reductions and also other characters around that area. And don't you worry, it's not a faction with just one horde. You have access to a brand new Lord option known as the Black Orc War Bosses. This is the only Lord option that you'll have access to, and he is very, very strong. This is a character that a lot of people have been waiting for in vanilla, actually. So they have access to their hordes, which is pretty damn good. At the end of the day, that means that you can have multiple characters going into different locations, and they're very, very strong. Also getting access to the Warboard Chariot, which I think is super, super cool, and some skills specific to focusing up on boosting up your Black Orcs. So if you're one of those types of people who used to play very big Black Orc armies during the whole 6th edition period, this might be a faction specifically for you. I like him, I really do. He keeps it on theme, which I think is rather important. It's a shame that we still don't have the Black Orc War Bosses in vanilla, because at the end of the day, it would be nice to have with Grimgore. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Creative Assembly. But yeah, gameplay loop, very basic, but kind of fun. It's one of those ones that if you just want to switch off, this is probably going to be a faction to play around with, and I think that's quite important. I've been doing that as I've been building up. As you guys know, if you follow me on Twitter, I've been building up some High Elves. Since Games Workshop decided to announce High Elves, I decided to go into my into my pile of shame and start getting mine sorted, but that requires some time, and I still want to play some Total War, so super, super chill. No focusing on big settlements, large empires, just damage, damage, and damage. And I can do that whilst waiting for glue to dry. So in multiplayer and skirmish and stuff, you've got access to these guys in their own kind of race sections, which shows you how stripped down their roster is. It's kind of cool. Very, very specialized, and I think that's something that could happen in certain cases. I mean, obviously it was a thing for Skarsnik until, you know, you capture 8 peaks, but little sub-faction mods like this really make the game shine, and there's quite a few new units, actually. So we're going to talk about it in just a second. It's just a lot to talk about because there's a lot of variants. They've got, like, Black Orc Boar Chariots, which is obviously something that we've been seeing in Warhammer the Old World, which are really, really fun. Very, very overpowered in the tabletop. They've got access to dual weapons for the Black Orcs, which is really cool. That means that you've got all 3 flavors now, in case you want to just really theme your armies there. Black Orc Boar Riders too, which pretty scary, not gonna lie. Boars look super cool though. And you do have access to some other fun bits, like obviously some crossbowmen. This is more of a Regiment of Renown thing, obviously, as you guys know from the Dogs of War, but it's been turned into a unit, so it gives you a little bit of range to play around with if you're not really keen on using too many arrow boys. So they're pretty decent in melee too. You do have access to some artillery, which is orcs using the bolt throwers, which is kind of nice, and then the scrap launcher, which is a catapult because you don't have the goblins to use the rock lobbers. I kind of like the idea that, you know, they're using a little bit more technology. Black Orcs are supposed to be smarter, so they do have access to a little bit more there. And there is special units that you can get, like Wyvern Riders. You get them during the war, which is a little bit of a throwback, because obviously there are the Hippogriff Riders in Bretonnia. This is kind of the same kind of idea. You do have the Black Orc War Boss, who can be on foot, he can be mounted too. Your hero, the Big Boss, which has been available for quite some time now in vanilla, can also mount up on a variety of different mounts, so that makes him really, really fun. Overall, yeah, I mean, I really like this. I think it's going to be a cool little sub-faction to play around with more. I'm literally just doing this video now as I've been playing around for a few hours. I'm going to take a little break from building up elves, because I'm really dreading painting up the elves. You guys know the Island of Blood ones, lots of trim, lots of little detail. So I'm just going to enjoy some Total War. And yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's have a bit of discussion. The mod can be found in the description. And have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.